Hello everyone, my name is Shivani and welcome to my YouTube channel Neuro Chat with AG. On this channel, I plan to cover topics that are closest to my heart and support the neurodiverse community. Topics related to neurodiversity, autism, late autism diagnosis, and autism in women and girls. I will interview thought leaders, esteemed researchers, scientists, professors, doctors, and psychologists and seek their views and updates on their latest work and research. I will also chat with parents of neurodiverse kids and adults and talk about experiences of neurodiverse individuals. Lastly, keeping inclusivity as a topmost priority, we might also discuss controversial disparate views for a collective understanding of issues and respect for diverse views. All the views and topics discussed are for informational purposes only. If you are interested in watching more quality content on this topic, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to press the bell icon to be notified whenever a new video is uploaded. Please also share the channel with your friends, family, and social media platforms. Thank you. My guest today, Dr. Shivani Pandit, is an experienced special educator with a rich history of dedicating 27 plus years to the field. She has a master's and doctorate in special education from Rutgers University, New Jersey, and a bachelor's degree from India. As an associate instructor at Columbia University, she has significantly contributed to academic teachings and research, specializing in fields that align with her passion for community development and social justice. Dr. Pandit specializes in incidental teaching strategies for children with autism from birth to 5 years of age. She is the founder slash director of Saamarthya, a nonprofit organization that provides evidence-based intervention services to children with autism and other intellectual disabilities and their families. Trained meticulously in early intervention strategies, Dr. Pandit has emerged as a guardian of hope for families navigating the complexities of neurodevelopmental challenges.
Thank you so much, Akansh, for having me. This is such a pleasure to be on your show, on your channel, and I appreciate all the good work that you're doing with these series. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. And to jump right into it, could you please talk about your journey? What inspired you to specialize in special education, and what key experiences have shaped it?
Sure. So it's a journey. It's really a lifelong journey. It started way back when I was maybe 11 or 12. So I grew up in India, in New Delhi, and at the time that I was growing up, the field of special education really wasn't existent in the sense that I personally in my school had never interacted with any child with a different ability. And so I think at the time the society schools were quite segregated. Maybe children were just going to special schools and not necessarily in any kind of mainstream setting. And at that time, I was in maybe sixth grade or seventh grade, and I interacted with a adult with an intellectual disability who used to, who was somebody's relative who, used to come to our place every once in a while where we stayed in New Delhi. And as a 11-year-old, 12-year-old, I really didn't know what intellectual disability meant or was or what it entails. And so her interactions with me led me to the understanding of basically she would want to play with us and not understanding why a young adult was wanting to play with someone like me, would confuse me. I wasn't sure what was going on. And a social worker in our, in our society where we used to stay, explained to me what intellectual disability was and really took down all the sort of, they say that if you have ignorance, you have stigma, right? If you don't understand something, you tend to be afraid of it, or you tend to think of it in ways that's not true. And I think that's what was happening to me at the time because I didn't know what it was. I really didn't know how to respond or how to interact with this lady. And the minute I understood what intellectual disability was, and she explained it to me in a very factual manner and in a very strength-based manner, I understood, but that interaction never really left me. And I kept on thinking about what that meant and why didn't I see such children in my school and where did they go to school, where did they learn, who were their friends, how did they make friends, because I understood in this interaction, the brief interaction that I had with her was that she really just wanted to have a friend. And now as an adult, thinking back, I can put the pieces together and I have the language and the words to say what that meant to me then. It was really questions of equity, and questions of, inclusion is what I had in my mind. But as an 11-year-old, I didn't have those words. I just had questions. And those questions never really left me. And that interaction had a deep impact on my mind. And I kept thinking about what happens to such children? How do they learn? How do they make friends? These were the only two questions I had, and I didn't have answers, and I didn't have anybody who could give me those answers. And I started to think about how might it be if I could work with such children? Didn't know what that meant. Didn't know the word special education. Didn't know how people qualify. But long story short, that one interaction sort of led me down this path of curiosity and questioning and wondering. And I found myself at 18 to go into an undergraduate degree in special education. And I still remember when I entered my institution in Secunderabad in India, my first thought was, I'm home. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And I have been doing that since I was 18. So I would say, like I said in the beginning, it's a lifelong journey, is what I would say. But I think there was some sort of purpose in understanding uh, the whole idea of equity and inclusion, as I can see it today as an adult. But as a child, it was just about how does one become friends and how do these children go to school. So it was about education and social inclusion. Hope that answers your question.
How would you describe your approach to special education? Are there specific teaching methods or philosophies you find particularly effective?
Absolutely. So, special education for me personally, and my work has been with children with autism and children with intellectual disabilities throughout my career. And I find that this is something called routines-based intervention. Interventions that have evidence, of course, is important in special education. It's very important to follow approaches and strategies that have a good evidence behind it to showcase that these strategies work. But one of them is routines-based intervention, which has a lot of evidence behind it. And the simplest way to put it is the idea is that when we teach a child in an embedded environment, so embedded interventions means we embed the interventions during the daily day-to-day routines of the child, right? So instead of taking a child for, let's say, a special education session like this, where we are sitting at the table and I'm giving you some things to do and you are completing tasks, that's not natural for the child, right? If you think about a 4-year-old, no 4-year-old is going to learn like that. Embedded intervention or routines-based intervention is where we would look at what the child needs, what their objectives are, and embed them within the child's play routine. Most importantly, what does a 3-year-old do? 3-year-old likes to play. How does a 3-year-old learn? Learns through play. So when we look at any specific intervention and we embed within the play routine, it's going to be very successful versus a sort of an unnatural sort of format. So the strategies and the approaches that I particularly follow are naturalistic, are family centered. So naturalistic is what I just explained to you, that we look at the child, we look at the child's needs, we look at the child's age, and we try to figure out what is the most natural environment for this child to learn. Is it a play school? Is it a preschool? Is it a park? Is it the mall? Is it at the grandma's house? Is it in his own play routine in his home? There are all these different routines which are extremely wonderful if you want to embed interventions within that. And when we work that way with a child who has a disability, there's something called generalization, right? They don't have to struggle with generalization. So if I teach a child a particular play skill in his own home, in a play routine, I can then take that to his cousin's house. I can teach the mom to do the same play routine in a cousin's house or in the playground. So the multiple settings in which the child is, we want him to be able to generalize what he's learning, he or she, right? So we don't want to teach children a specific task for a specific setting, if you will. So naturalistic, embedded, routines-based interventions work that way. And the other one is family-centered approach. So I have been trained in that, and this is something I believe in passionately, and this is something I have brought to our organization. We will talk about that in just a second, is a family-centered approach, meaning we work with the entire family unit and we understand the family's priorities, the family's needs, and the family's concerns. So any intervention that is outside of that context will not make sense. It will be temporary success for the child, right? So if it is in the context of the family's needs, priorities, and priorities primarily, Then those interventions that we are going to work on as a special educator or as an occupational therapist or as any other kind of therapist, when it is in the context of the family dynamic or the family centered approach, it tends to have more success. So I would say these two I would point out as two main philosophies or approaches that I have been working throughout my career, and that's something I continue to do that even today in my organization.
Could you tell us more about the Samarthya Foundation, its mission, and the specific supports and services it offers?
Sure. So I started Saamarthya Foundation. It's a 501(c)(3) registered nonprofit in the US as well as a trust in India. So, our work is primarily with families in India, and I'll just go back a little bit to where we started and where we are today. So, around in 2019 is when we started offering, online programs to families. So, I started Samarthya with a very explicit mission of supporting families that have children with autism or IDD or any other neurodevelopmental disorder who are unable to access resources and services. They could have multiple reasons for that. They could live in a very small town in India where there are no qualified therapists, or they could live in a town where there are therapists but no good therapy centers, and by good I mean quality. Or they could live in a place where there are good quality therapists and centers, but they don't have the financial means to afford, because all of this is something that the parents are doing on their own. So if they have they come from a lower socioeconomic background and they're unable to pay for those services, what ends up happening is that children don't receive the kinds of supports and resources they should as soon as the diagnosis is made. Going back even sometimes, in smaller towns and cities in India, we could even have an issue of early identification. The child may not be identified as soon as they could have. So the early intervention window, we are working with that very seriously, right? So sometimes parents may think there's a concern, but they don't have the right professionals to identify and say, yes, there's a developmental concern. And with this concern, we would recommend you to do XYZ, which is pretty much early intervention. So when that doesn't happen, the child is going to get delayed services, right? And then the rest of the barriers that I mentioned earlier come into play. So to start Samarthya, my explicit mission was to reach out to those far-flung areas, regions, places where children are diagnosed, but the parents don't know where to take them. And if they can take them, but they are struggling financially and they're unable to pay for those services. So we started Samarthya online, purely online, and it really took off in a way in 2020. Of course, as you know, everybody was quickly had to learn how to get online and Skype and Zoom and all of that. So we started with doing a lot of parent training. So I've designed these, parent training modules in English and Hindi and Marathi, which is another Indian language, to reach out to parents to teach them, to empower them with the skills that they should have to work with their children at home in case there's no therapist in place, right? So I've sort of taken the knowledge of special education that I have and the strategies and the evidence and simplified and tried to create some kind of material which is, takes evidence-based practices, but simplifies it in a way that the parent can actually implement that at home in the context of their daily routines. So we are going back to the first question. So this is how we started the trainings, and I trained over 160 parents just online in small groups and small cohorts. And I helped them understand each developmental domain. So what happens is that development is so comprehensive, and sometimes parents don't understand because obviously they're not trained in this subject. So helping them understand that a child's development is not just academic, it's not just about school, it's not just about grades, it's a whole lot more than that. We help them understand what is cognitive development, what is language development, what is play development, play skill development, what is social emotional learning. So there are so many different domains under development that we want to help parents understand, because once they understand how a child develops and how comprehensive that growth and development is and the role that they can play at home, it truly empowers them. So that was how we started. And then we started to offer, one-on-one special education interventions to children online. So this was just a parent would come to us with a diagnosed, some kind of a diagnosis, mostly ASD or IDD. and we would do an assessment online, and we would offer one-on-one intervention service to the child. If the child was unable to sit in front of the screen, we would train the parent. So we would do a lot of parent coaching so that at least we could help the parent work with the child at home. And in 2020, we also started a program, a therapeutic recreational program called Club Ananda, which in Sanskrit and Hindi, Ananda means joy. So it's a place where we wanted to create a space of joy and belonging for children of all abilities. And we started it in 2021, I think, with twice a week sessions free of cost to any parent who just had Zoom could join in. And we have been continuing that even till today. So that's one of the things that I'm particularly proud of being able to offer a therapeutic recreational platform for children. And there we try to expose children to various different things that they may not have exposure to in general. So we do all kinds of things like art, craft, yoga, movement, Zumba, photography, various things that could help them it's a, again, like I said, therapeutic recreational. Then we started, so we did parent training, we did one-on-one interventions, we did Club Ananda, we started doing some group sessions. So when parents would come to us and say, I really need some help with helping my child with reading comprehension, for example, it's a very specific thing. And we had a group of, like, let's say 5 to 10 parents. We would put them together in a group and provide some intensive support over a course of 10 days. So it's like a camp. It's all online. So all of this was happening online, and we were starting to see families connected to us through, the technology. And we had parents coming from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh and Lucknow, and it's like spread out across the country. So the barrier of location was not there for them. And our model also has been a sliding scale model in the sense that, we work with parents. If parents are able to afford some fee for service, we would charge them, but then we would slide down all the way to pro bono. For parents who have financial constraint, we do pro bono services. Significant portion of our families receive pro bono services for the services that we offer. And then a lot of the programs that we offer are free anyways for anyone, because again, we want to break that barrier of lack of access, to resources. And so then we started doing the group sessions, and we would also do a lot of these webinars where we would have experts come in and talk about a specific topic like assistive technology, or visual schedules for children with autism, or how do you address challenging behaviors at home. And getting these experts and working with the partner organization. We work with a parent organization called Saamarthya Foundation in Nagpur, and we would get hundreds of parents for coming in for these sessions. So these are all free again. But the idea is to help parents, give them so much knowledge that they can empower themselves, right? Now, in January of this year, we rented a space in Pune, where we have opened our very first family resource center in Pune, Maharashtra. And the idea behind that is it's basically everything we do online continues. So we have a hybrid approach now. So our online services are going on as usual, but we have added this in-person offline service because we see a need to do that. And we're establishing this FRC, which is a family resource center, as a center of excellence in that particular city. And eventually the long-term vision is to create that model that can be replicable, and then we can replicate it to other parts, maybe around Pune or in other states. It all depends on all kinds of things, funding, resources, bandwidth, but that's the big vision of Saamarthya, is to take that center of excellence, get some good impact data, test out innovative ideas and programs and solutions for children and families, and replicate it. Now, it's a family resource center. It's specifically called a family resource center because, again, going back to your first question, I believe in a family-centered approach. So family resource center means we address the child's needs. When a child comes to us, walks through our door with any kind of a disability diagnosis, we, of course, assess, evaluate. We create an IEP, which is an individualized education plan for the child, in which we will say the child has XYZ needs. For those needs, these are the strategies, these are the number of sessions the child needs. Child may need special education, occupational therapy, speech therapy, whatever that particular child needs, we would create that program for them. But in addition, parallelly, we would work with the family. That's the most important thing that I find is sometimes missing, is that so much of the focus is on the child and the interventions is very child centric. We want to be family centric so that the child is at the center of that universe. But in that ecosystem of disability, we are creating programs specifically for parents, specifically for grandparents, specifically for the neurotypical siblings, because each member of that family unit has their own unique needs. And we want to be able to understand and address them and support them in a way that ultimately all of those needs, when they are addressed, will help in having a successful family outcome, not just a child outcome. So that's that's the current where we are and the supports and services that Samarthya is offering. So should I extend and elaborate on those programs right now?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, we have children that we are serving one-on-one. We have an occupational therapist, we have counselors, and we have special educators who do the one-on-one intervention part. But we also started something called Sukoon Saturdays. Sukoon in Hindi, Urdu means peace. Once a month, the second Saturday of each month is dedicated to the parent, to the caregiver. It could be the mom, the dad, or both of them, where we are using expressive art therapy as a tool to support them and give them that space or the platform for self-care. Because oftentimes what happens is that when a child with a disability is born, there are so many challenges that the parents deal with, from diagnosis to doctors to medical care to therapies to school to financial issues. There's so much that a parent is dealing with that they are at the very last, at the, what do you say, um, of their own list, right? They don't even take the time out for themselves. And emotional well-being and well-being in general of parents is something that is not being addressed proactively. What happens is that parents just do what they need to do and they just keep doing what they need to do. So here we've created this program called Sukoon Saturday. We want them to step back a little. We want to give them that hour of support and services, and we use expressive art therapy as a tool. This is a year-long program we have created, and it's at no cost to the parent. They come on a Saturday, and we have a space created for the child, so they don't have to worry about childcare either. If they have a child and they don't have any place to take the child to, they just bring them to us, and we have a group of volunteers and our team members who have activities for the children while the parents have this. We're creating this space for the parents. We have another program called Sensory Splash. So this is once a month. We offer our occupational therapist curates this session where we are providing sensory activities to children at no cost. So children can just come in and we figure out, what kinds of activities can be provided in our occupational therapy room. So that's open to the community as well. We are currently working on creating a program for neurotypical siblings where it would be a group of support. And it's called, the title of our program, yet we haven't started, it's going to start from January, is Sibling Squad. So getting these siblings together where they are the focus of attention, where we can really talk to them about what might be their needs and create programs accordingly. That's another one. Another one that I can share is we are working to support parents in how can they navigate the system. They have to apply for what's called a UDID card, and the things that they need to do to receive resources and supports from the government. That can be a hugely overwhelming thing for parents as well. So we are going to have a UDID help desk set up from January at our center. Again, at no cost, parents can come in. So just to kind of summarize, all that we are doing at our family resource center, as you've just heard, is looking at the various aspects of what might support look like for different members of the same family. So we want to extend and expand from just the child to the entire family ecosystem and be able to really help them in a way that supports them in the long term.
is there a success story or a moment where you witnessed the foundation's positive impact that you'd like to share?
Oh, there are many, but very small ones. But I feel like sometimes the small moments are really big ones, really profound ones. So there's one I can share where I was working with this cohort of mothers online. I think this was in 21 or 22, doing all these, parent trainings on different developmental domains. And parents are really excited, engaged, and hungry for knowledge. Like parents really are very committed. If you help them, they will take your help to the next level, right? And this is an example of exactly that. So there's this mother from Bihar, a small town, and we were talking about, how important reading books is for children with disabilities and how reading a book can help in different developmental domains like cognition, learning, literacy, social emotional skills, and all of that. So I did one session, taught them the importance of what that is and why books are important and how could you read with the child with different ability levels. And a few, weeks later, this mother uh, came to the session, and she said that she was thanking me about that particular session. She said I had the most amazing experience, and I was like, "What happened?" And her daughter at the time was 5, non-speaking. She had no language at the time when she was 5, nonverbal, and diagnosed with autism. And the mom basically started this practice of teaching her to read books, and she started with the sequence in which I had taught her. And within a matter of a week or 10 days, she said that her daughter would bring a stack of books to her without any language, mind you. She would just bring it to her, stand in front of her at night. This was a bedtime routine. That book reading, I wanted them to embed within a bedtime routine. And the child would bring like a stack of books that she could handle every night in front of the mom and say, basically look at her and say, read. And they were doing a reading routine for about 20 minutes before going to bed. And the mom said, and of course, that was very overwhelming for the mother because the child had never done that until then. But I asked her, so why is it that? So the mom said, I never knew that she was so interested in books and that she was so, interested in reading. And I said, why didn't you try this before? And she said, well, I was told that children with autism will not learn or read. Now, this is something that she might have heard from a professional or another parent or something, I don't know. But this was a barrier in her own mind where she didn't think that her child could do a certain thing. And this activity switched a light bulb in her mind about, her child is capable of anything. And so her child's ability to sit for 20, 25 minutes every night reading 5 different books was a huge accomplishment for this mother. And she completely redid her room to put children's books everywhere because she understood, she made that connection. So the idea of what we tell parents, how we talk to parents, and how we teach them has a huge impact on what they do with their children at home. And they are the primary teachers in a way, right? Because they are the ones spending the maximum amount of time with their child at home.
How do you think schools and communities can better support students with special needs to ensure that they thrive academically and socially? What needs to change from the way it is right now?
Um, Two things. I would answer your question in two parts or two ways. I think one is, I think if schools could adopt universal design for learning, UDL, you might have heard of this terminology. UDL basically is the idea that there is variability in the classroom. Understanding that variability is not the exception but the norm. When you recognize that every child in your classroom is going to have different needs, whether there's a diagnosis of disability or not, every child learns differently, every child is different, and that if we provide that flexibility in a classroom through the adoption, I think, of universal design of learning, I think that that would transform the state of education, particularly inclusion or inclusive practices, as we say. Because what happens is that there, in that environment, in that model, it'll make sure that no student is left behind, right? Because you are catering to the needs of every single learner in every different possible way. So Universal design of learning basically talks about how can we engage the children in multiple ways, right? They're all about multiple ways of engagement, multiple ways of representation, multiple ways of expression. I think these are the three sort of core, if I'm not mistaken, principles of universal design of learning. What that means is when you're talking about multiple, then you are diversifying your ability to see your classroom. And when you say engagement, like maybe some children like to learn in one-on-one, maybe some children like to learn in group. How can we ensure that each student, each learner has a way of engaging with the material in the classroom? Then it could be that you have a student with autism or not. You could have a student who's a second language learner or not, right? So there's so much of variability and diversity in a classroom as it is. When we don't adopt an approach like this is when we are not inclusive, right? So for inclusion to work or for schools to be inclusive, I would say looking at learning, exploring, and adopting this sort of approach would be the best. The second aspect of universal design of learning in a classroom would be is the representation, right? So not just one size fits all, right? Some students could learn through visual aids. You have a student with autism, he's maybe going to do great with visual aids. Some students may like interactive media, some may like audio recordings, some may like just lesson, just reading, some may like hands-on experiences. So this way we are catering to all the different disabilities in the classroom and may not even be disabilities. Like I said, we all neurotypical people as well have our own ways of learning, right? So then the third one would be how does a student produce work or how does a student express themselves? So again, multiple means of expression. So here again, you could have students using technology. Some students may be okay with oral presentations. Some students may be okay with written assignments. So when a teacher is trained to think in a way that their entire classroom is diverse and giving students multiple ways, so that universal learning environment, I think, is the most important thing in my opinion today. Um, to be able to serve the needs of all the learners and play to their strengths, and then it shifts from a deficit based model to a strength based model, right? What's a deficit based model is that if you have a student with autism, they cannot do 10 things. If you have a student with Down syndrome, they cannot do 15 things. But let's look at what the student can do. How does the student learn really well? Look at their strengths, play to their strengths, and give that sort of provide that sort of environment in the classroom so that that student can be successful in the inclusive class. That's one. The second one I would say is the focus on social emotional learning. And I feel like ensuring that all students in any given classroom have the tools, are given the tools and the strategies to ensure that their social emotional skills are facilitated, I think is another big transformative change that schools and education systems should really proactively think about. And then within that, we talk about how does that then help that group of students who have maybe a diagnosed disability. But I'm even zooming out of that and saying social emotional learning is for everybody. Being able to help students with, being able to really face their, whatever emotional, social communication challenges that they may be facing, and having a classroom that supports those needs, I think again goes to, sort of making that classroom much more accessible and inclusive to all. And if I can just add to this, this is more theoretical, right? Like my answer was all about theory, but with this, we have connected it to an actual project that we are offering and working on at Saamarthya, which is we created a toolkit for teachers that work with grades 1 through 5. And the toolkit is called LEND, LEND, which is Learning Empathy, Nurturing Diversity. So what we did was that we looked at the evidence on social emotional learning, and we decided to create a toolkit that helps teachers create a classroom that is rich in SEL. SEL is social emotional learning, right? So that it benefits every single student in the class. Doesn't matter where you are, who you are, where you come from, what your disability diagnosis is. If every single student is given a classroom that is rich with SEL practices, right? And then within that, we picked up empathy as a building block, because empathy is one of the things that comes under the SEL realm of research. And we focused on empathy as a building block in this toolkit in such a way, then that classroom becomes inclusive, because when you are empathetic, you are going to be inclusive to other people, other children, your peers with neurodivergence, right? So Lend Toolkit is one of those examples where I would love for every school to invest their time, resources, professional development for their teachers on ensuring that their teachers have the skills and the strategies to make their classrooms more SEL rich. Why? Because it's going to benefit every single student that they have, irrespective of their background and their ability levels. But also within that, if we focused on this empathy bit, right? I think that children, if we can facilitate the empathy part in a classroom, those classrooms will become more inclusive for children with disabilities.
Among all these things, and I know these are all very important changes, but if there was one change you could make in the education system to better support students with special needs, what would it be and why?
I would still go back to, I think, the teacher training aspect and the universal design of learning, because it has, really far-reaching implications. I think if we can train teachers to be able to address the needs of all children in a single classroom without thinking about pulling a student out for a subject or having a special education program elsewhere, I think if we can figure out a way, and I think it goes back to teacher training and how can we best impart this knowledge to teachers around universal design of learning, I think is a more most appropriate for the moment. I'm sure there are many others.
Is there any other advice you have for parents or caregivers of children with special needs who are navigating the education system?
Absolutely. I would say that first things first, and I tell this to a lot of parents who come to me for like coaching and counseling, is that adopting a strength-based approach is the first step. A lot of times, parents have been pushed into this deficit-minded approach where they are told that there's a disability diagnosis, and what that means is that there are XYZ things that the child cannot do, right? So you're already talking in a deficit based sort of framework. So first things first, I would encourage parents to shift that into a strength based approach. By that I mean, yes, of course, we know if there's a disability, there are challenges that come with it, and we recognize those and we work on them. We don't ignore them, but at the same time, try to learn, understand your child for who they truly are. And they are not defined by their disability, right? The disability is a part of who they are. But who is your child? What do they like? What are their likes, dislikes, their strengths? What, sparks interest in them? What is something that you see them paying attention to? Understand your child really, really well, so then you can advocate for your child. So the second part would be, I think the first is understanding your child really above and beyond that label, whatever that label may be, going above and beyond that. Second part is being an advocate for your child. But once you understand your child, then you can really advocate really well. Then you can say, okay, here are my child's strengths, unique strengths and challenges. What kinds of resources are available? Then talking to the right people. And I would say finally, third point would be is to ensure that you have a community around you. I think it's very important for parents to find that network or of other parents or friends or family who can support them through this journey, especially for their well-being. So I think finding that support would be another recommendation. And the fourth one would be is I think truly celebrate every my small milestone that the child is accomplished. It could be the smallest thing, like this parent who came and celebrated this child wanting to read for 20 minutes. That's a big thing. That may seem like something very small to someone, but for that parent that was a very big accomplishment, right? So being able to celebrate those little milestones will help parents be able to pick up on more of those victories, those small victories along their journey.
It's great advice. Thank you. Dr. Pandit, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn about, your amazing journey, your innovative approach to special education, and all of the impactful work you've done through the Saamarthya Foundation. Your passion and dedication is really inspiring, and thank you again for sharing your knowledge and experiences.
Thank you so much, Akash. This was such a pleasure to sit here and talk to you. And thank you again for doing the work that you're doing. It's very impressive, and I really wish you all the best for all your upcoming episodes and interactions with folks in the field. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.